Lucas, and welcome to Comedy 101. Comedy 101 is created to empower comedians all over the world. And today I have a special guest and a full turn co-host, Mr. Bob Long.
Hey, how's everybody doing? Glad you could all make it here
Wow.
tonight. I
Yes,
see we got a
yes.
great crowd. Look at them. I think
Great
there must be an
crowd.
accountant conference going on here. We got a lot of accountants in the
Yes.
audience today.
I think we have a lot of cheering squad today.
Oh, there we
See? There
go.
we go. Thank you,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I hope you will
Wow,
continue
that's a big crowd there, Danny.
long. Yes. I think it's 1 million crowd. 1 million crowd and people, welcome to Comedy 101. I'm reviving from the office. We're gonna talk about comedy itself, right,
Yeah.
Mr. Bob?
Yeah, we're going to talk about roast battles. You know what a roast battle is?
Enlighten us. What is a roast battle?
So typically a roast battle is two comedians get up on stage and they
Oh yes,
basically make fun of each other and find humorous things to say about the other one in order to kind of take them down a notch. So the battle part is that you're trying to essentially insult the other comic to the point where it looks like you're the winner. Now the
yes,
interesting thing is a roast battle comes from just a roast. So you've seen the Comedy Central roast where they have a celebrity on and they kind of make fun of the celebrity. Well, but the celebrity typically, I mean, they may say a few things, but they're not really battling the comedians, right? They're kind of just taking it. Whereas a roast battle is where you exchange barbs, right? So I would
yes,
say something, you know, uh, you know, to you, and then you would come back to me, and the idea would be you try to top each other each time as you go along, and the person who kind of gets the best zinger in there wins. But back in the 40s, the Friars Club in New York City used to do roasts, and they would roast their members, and so they would have people come in, for an audience, and then they'd take somebody who was part of the Friars Club, the comedians, and then they would say, and then would tell jokes about them while they sat there on the stage, laughing at all of the mean things that the other comedians would say about them. But in the early 2000s, it took on a new connotation where you have the battle. So that's where the battle comes into things. So the battle is you trade barbs and you're trying to basically win the roast. So you're
oh
roasting
nice.
each other, but you're trying to be the one who has the best roast, the best jokes
The best
above
jokes, yes.
everybody else, right? So the interesting thing is Jeff Ross, who's a comedian out in California and other places. He started doing roasts at the Comedy Store in Los Angeles in the club's belly room. They have a couple of different rooms at the Comedy Store. There's actually a great documentary on the Comedy Store on Netflix right now. If you go look it up, and you can see they talked to a lot of people who were coming up through the 70s who started doing stand-up comedy, like David Letterman and Jay Leno and those folks, all the way to today. And it's a really good documentary. You should check it out. But Jeff Ross is kind of noted to be the roast master general, and he usually is on Comedy Central leading all these new roasts. But the roast that happened now, but he was doing the thing called roast battle uh, at the Comedy Store with Brian Moses, who was another comedian there, and so they would trade barbs. Um, and then Jimmy Carr, who's a British comedian, actually participated in this when he was in California, and then he took it over to the UK, and they had a UK version of roast battle that was on Comedy Central in Europe as well. And so then they have judges, right? So the new version of this, a little bit, it's not really a roast battle, it's called Kill Tony, where you get up and tell jokes, and they have judges say who has the best jokes. But but the battle part is, just trying to one up each other. between telling the best joke on somebody. Like a lot of times, it's like you're wearing a toupee or something, and they make fun of their hair, and some of it can be pretty brutal when you get down to it. And it seems like nowadays that the more brutal the joke, the more people seem to like it. So it's a little bit more of a personal jab at people. But if you've ever stayed up late at night, about 10 years ago or so forth, they used to have these roasts, the Dean Martin celebrity roast. I don't know if you remember that from the 70s. Do you remember that? And they used to have a commercial late on television about 10 or 15 years ago where you could buy the DVD or something. And then those were not roast battles, but more the traditional Friars Club roast, where they would just, make fun of a celebrity. So they would have a celebrity come on, and there was kind of a cast of people, kind of like Jeff Ross does now on Comedy Central. But I actually have taken part, and still take part from every now and again in roast battles over at a site called plausible.com, where comedians kind of hang out, and there's a show called Roast Battle where you go on and then you get paired up with other comedians, and you're given 5 minutes to write material, and then after that, then you are against that person, and then everybody who's there for the roast battle will judge you on how effective your jokes were, um, and see who wins.
Yes.
I have not been terribly successful, Daniel, in the roast battle. I'll be honest with you.
Why not? What
Well,
you missing?
I think I'm not quite as vicious and mean spirited as that's my assessment. And that's not their assessment. I think a lot of times I'm not terribly mean spirited with my jokes. I like to be more. I'm definitely a more silly, absurd joke teller rather than being a little bit more tough on people. Like if you
Yes.
have funny teeth or something, you make fun of their person's teeth. If they have funny hair, or even not, if they don't have funny hair. One guy I know has great hair, and we make fun of his hair all the time because it looks so nice, and
Yes.
everybody else doesn't have great hair. So the but yeah, it's I think typically speaking, I'm not um, quite as vicious as maybe other folks are with their jokes. We
S-
make a lot. We make, well, so it's an international crowd, so we make fun of accents,
Yeah.
right? So there's a lady there who is Russian, came from Russia. She's came from Russia, and she still has a very heavy accent. So a lot of times people will poke fun of her accent, and so forth. So it really is. I mean, I'm not describing it as terribly funny, but it is funny when you watch it, and I think a lot of people, would like it if you watched it. So typically, there's a time limit. So and for the one that I've done, we basically have 5 jokes. We have come up with 5 jokes in 5 minutes, and then you tell your jokes one at a time, and then the other person gets a chance to respond about your joke, right? So if I said, well, Daniel today, obviously his hair was styled by the wind because he's got a bit of flyaway hair there on his forehead. And then you could come back to me and say, well, Bob, obviously you just licked yourself clean, and because I'm a cat, right? So that would be, you'd have your comeback joke, and then you'd have another joke which would say, "Don't you ever change your shirt, Bob? It's always the same green striped shirt." And then I could come back and say, "Well, at least I have style compared to you, Daniel." I don't know, but anyway, you see what I'm saying? We just go back and forth. You
Yes.
can't. It's all verbal. You can't like touch anybody or anything, but we do it virtually, so it doesn't matter about that. And then they tell you to try to not to respect boundaries and not gear towards sensitive topics. But I can tell you that most of the battles I've been in, they usually are pretty brutal. And then the judges, in this case, the ones I participated in, everybody who's not roast battling is a judge, and then they
Yes.
all give their votes, and then however many votes you get depends if you win the battle, and it's all just for fun. And so it's not like it's there's not any money at
Competition.
stake or anything
Yeah.
like that. I think they do actually give away money on the shows, the television shows and whatnot, but typically
Just
it's all in good fun, and you
just
get
for
you get the
fun.
bragging rights.
Yes. So, Mr. Bob, how is it roast battles evolve over time?
Well, mostly they were just about they were originally just towards people, and the other person really didn't say anything, but the battle part came along whenever you just basically got two people going at it. So that's really the main evolution of it is the fact that you could speak back, right? You could say something back to the person who was roasting you. But I think nowadays with the internet and being virtual and everything, it's really expanded because I've participated in roast battles where I'm roasting people from all over the country. So they're in California, they're in Missouri, they're in New York, they're everywhere. And so I think that's the big difference nowadays is the fact that you're not limited by going to a club to do it. So you can, you know, you can do this online and meet people like you're in Toronto and I'm in St. Louis. And that wouldn't happen on a regular Friday night because we'd have to be in the same town to have a roast battle. But nowadays online, you can do it wherever. Doesn't matter. And
Anytime,
in this
anywhere.
instant, you can roast a cartoon,
Like
which
you.
doesn't happen in real life either.
Imagine, can I use a dragon instead of mine? That'd
Yeah.
be awesome.
You'll be Daniel the Dragon. Is that it?
Yes. So
Well,
how do cultural and societal contexts shape what is considered funny? Like
that that's a good question. So on the roast battle,
roast battle.
cultural things can be part of this because that could be, you could turn that into some kind of negative. Like I mentioned, the woman from Russia. You make fun of the fact that she's here in the States, and then she still has a Russian accent, and then I'm trying to just as a uh, the her name is Jenia. You see, the best way to get Jenia to do what you want, give her a pair of blue jeans, and that's a Russian because back in the day, Russians couldn't get Levi's, and there was a whole black market for Levi's for Russian people, and so you're using that cultural context to make a joke and say how easy it is to manipulate Jenia just by bribing her with a pair of Levi's. So I mean that's what you would use. So you use some of that to your advantage, and then some of it you would use. So one of the Suraj, he's from India, and so he is Indian, and so a lot of times we joke with him about being the IT help.
Yes.
And I'll say, well, I don't know why you're here. We don't need any help with our computers. And so again, it's a stereotypical cultural thing that folks from India are the help desk, and so then you play off of that, to kind of roast the other person. So Reg is not an IT person. He does other things, but that's just using that kind of cultural context that everyone knows, right? They all have heard it, and using that in the comedic sense to poke fun, even though obviously he's not. They're not
Funny.
basically driven by those things, but you throw that out there because it pulls the audience in because they've all heard it, right? So it's a shared experience via the news and via other things that people are aware of, and so therefore, um, you can find the humor in it, especially whenever you're there with the person and they have some, small knowledge of the person to know that they're not what you're battling over, what you're roasting them on, and so it makes it funny.
Make it funny, people. So, Mr. Bob, Why does comedy or roast battles have the power to bring people together to laugh?
Well, I think everybody likes, if you think about whenever you're with your friends, right? Everybody has a friend who you can kid around with, and then that friend knows, certain things about you that they exaggerate to make fun of you, and I think that's kind of an intimate experience with humor, right? Because you're friendly and you trust each other, you know each other, and so you can kind of bat around these kind of absurd statements. And I think the roast battle brings that into a public area, so where it's just like that. It's just like having your best friend there joking with you, but you're doing it in a public forum, and it makes it much more intimate, an intimate humor that is not just take my wife please kind of Henny Youngman type jokes that people tell. And I think that's what pulls the audience in, is because sometimes they're thinking, it is certainly a way of thinking, right? So you're trying to think, what can I use that that's obvious to pull the audience in, but twist it in a way that makes it funny. And then people in the audience may be thinking the exact same things, and so it's that kind of ease, right? So if you can make things look easy, and people think they can do it, then it makes it more fun. When in reality, it's a little bit harder than that. So it's hard to necessarily come up with these things, but sometimes it's but everybody thinks about them. It just doesn't enter your head at the same time. And so once you say it, the other person's like, oh, I kind of was thinking that. That's so good, right? And then they find the humor in it and start laughing. And then once you get the ball rolling, um you know the interesting thing about comedy shows is, everybody's there to laugh. Rarely do you come into a comedy show and say, I don't really want to laugh.
Yes.
And so it's real easy to get the ball rolling on those kind of things, because people are really, really want to have that experience. And so all you have to do is barely, touch it to get it started.
So, Mr. Bob, are you natural comedian or born comedian, or you learn to be a comedian?
Well, I would say, I would say a little bit of both. So I think I've always been kind of a smart aleck, right? So I've
Yes.
always had smart thing, if you everybody doesn't use the word smart aleck, but I've always had kind of a smart mouth. So if somebody says something, then I'd have a comeback
Yes.
to that. And so therefore that part of me has always been there, even as a little kid, and that gets you in trouble when you're younger, especially when you're in school and talking to teachers. But I've always had that aspect of it. But I think the other thing is you kind of become at least for me, I become uh, very aware of pop culture, because that is a connecting point for people. And so the more you are absorbed in the pop culture, the more you can spin it to make it funny. And so that's the learning part, right? So you always have to be aware of what's going on, so that you can, even in the news, it doesn't even have to be pop culture. It just has to be what's going on in the world. So it's media, it's entertainment, it's everything. And with that, you can then use all that information to spin something in a humorous way.
So, how did you develop your unique style?
Well, I don't know if it's terribly unique, but I think
Comedic style. Hmm.
I think for me, my style, I'm not a joke teller, so I don't just tell jokes. I am more of a story person, and so a lot of times that's why roast battle kind of works out for me, because I'm telling a story about the other person,
Yes.
and I try to make that story be funny. And so that's where I think that I excel at, is in bringing kind of stories to life, even if they're just short, one sentence kind of stories. I'm not one to formulate a joke, like people, like kids would tell, or even other people would tell. I'm not a joke teller. as much as I am a reactor and a storyteller. And so that's where I've kind of gotten mine is over the years is I just love the back and forth. I usually try to have like I on my show in Static Radio, I have Miles who's my co-host, and we go back and forth, and I love the back and forth and the free flowing improvisation that we do, because then it's to me it's very fast paced and you're using your head a lot, right? So you're thinking constantly and trying to come up with something that is going to be a zinger to the other person. It's harder for me to do these things with just myself, and so then that's just more comedic storytelling as opposed to improvisation. Whereas roast battle, a lot of times when I've done them, I write my five zingers, and then whenever we go to do them, I don't stick with them. I come up with new stuff on the fly because that's the way I like to do things. And so they'll say something to roast me, and then I try to figure out a way to turn that back around on them, and that's the fun for me.
So, Mr. Chris, Mr. Bob, sorry.
What'd you
I'm
call me?
no, I'm thinking about Mr. Chris Rock when you're doing this
I'm Chris
comedy.
Rock.
Yeah, Chris Rock. I mean, in my mind,
You're not
it's
going to
like,
slap me, are you, Daniel?
no, no. So,
I'm
what
not
is
even.
your
I didn't
comment
talk
about
about
that?
your wife. I swear, Daniel. I didn't mention anything about your wife.
So, what is your comment about that? Is it too much personal, or I just want to be funny? What do you think about Chris Rock when delivering his comedy
Chri- I
tagline?
like. I like. Okay, Chris Rock is a really good example because I think Chris Rock is very much. He tells jokes, but he is very much a storyteller. If you listen to Chris Rock's comedy, he really does. Uh, spin a tale whenever he's talking about things,
Yes.
and he's very good at improvising as well, very very good. Obviously he's a pro, and so I think that it's interesting because he rides the line between both. And I think if you also look at Dave Chappelle is not, he can tell jokes, but Dave Chappelle tells stories. And I love listening to Dave Chappelle because he'll just talk about anything and he'll make it funny. And he'll feed off of the audience, same as Chris Rock, and they'll take it in the direction that the audience wants to go. If somebody happens to pipe up or say something, or uh, when he says something that doesn't hit, right? It doesn't, people don't laugh at, and he'll be like, "Oh, I guess we don't want to go there," right? And then he'll go in a different direction, but he'll make that interaction funny. And they're both super intelligent people because they see what's happening in the world, and then they can make that subject matter fit into their humor. And I mean, that's, I think people don't realize that a lot of humor is based upon um, current feelings in the world, right? So some things are funny mainly because of what's happening. And as soon as it stops happening, it's not funny anymore. And so you constantly have to be aware of what's going on in order to make sure that your humor is going to hit the right note. Because we've had, if you because you this is where you get into the wokeism and everything, and everybody talks about that. Well, wokeism is what's happening, and so you have to adjust your humor to fit into that, or else you're going to, it's not going to be funny for people. And I think some people accept that and some people don't. And but that is the reality. It's always been the reality. It's just now people are getting called out for it more, I think, than they did in the past. And so, you see humor in old movies and whatnot that nowadays you're like, that's not so funny. But at the time, the reason it's there is not because it wasn't funny. The reason it's there is because somebody at that time thought it was funny.
That's awesome. So, as a comedian, do you think Chris Rock go beyond the limit?
Oh, well, I think that's also part of the project here. If you're going to be a comedian, if you want to be a super safe comedian, I suppose you can be, but believe me, no one, you're not going to be funny all across the spectrum, right? Other comedians aren't going to think you're funny. because you're
Yes.
playing it too safe. You have to push the limit. That's what comedians are supposed to be doing. They're supposed to be finding the edge. And if they can be right at the edge, they're probably the funniest people that you know. Chris Rock is one of those folks who pushes to the edge. The problem when you go if you go too far over the edge, people don't like it and it's not funny. If you come too back far from the edge, again, it's not that funny. And so you have to go to the edge, and comedians are constantly trying to find the edge, because that's where you want to be, because that's where you're going to get the best laughs and you're going to get the best reaction from the audience.
Definitely agree. So, Mr. Bob, I want to take this opportunity to plug in my another podcast. Sex 101 is coming. New episode this coming Saturday. Yes, this coming Saturday. Sex
I
101,
can't
people.
help thinking that Comedy 101, and now you're saying Sex 101 is coming, that there has to be some humor in that,
There's
Daniel.
a humor. Do you think?
A little
Yes,
bit.
it's been a long time that I did not publish
And
my
there,
Sex
a long time
101.
you were
Long
just setting
time, yes.
yourself up for all these jokes with Sex 101.
Sex 101 is coming a new episode, people. Well, Sex 101, we talk about everything about sex because nowadays people are ashamed to talk about sex. Come on, we are mature enough to talk about everything on earth like sex. So please do tune in. Sex 101 new episode is coming live this coming Saturday at 9 a.m. PST. Okay, Mr. Bob, would you like to listen to our Sex 101? Or would you like to be my guest on Sex 101?
I don't I don't think I want to be your guest on Sex 101, Daniel. I don't know what you're going to get into with that, but I think I'll keep my distance on that one.
Okay,
I'll let you handle that all by yourself.
okay. So, so let me know if you change your mind.
Okay.
The slot is open for you. Let's talk about sex.
Oh my
So,
gosh, it just keeps setting up. The slot is open. Oh my gosh, Daniel, you just said you don't know comedy. What are you talking about? Every
so
one of your statements about Sex 101 is comedy.
but yes, most of the topic of people providing a comedy bar or whatever, they talk about sex and people are laughing,
Yeah.
right?
Oh yeah.
That'd be awesome. So, Mr. Bob, would you like to plug in something about your projects or?
I wish I had the plug in Sex 101, but I'm going to talk about Static Radio. Staticradio.com and at Static Radio on all the socials. Come for some hopefully some funny stuff. I want to tell you this last week's episode, a
Yes.
lot of sex talk.
Wow.
I won't get into it.
Okay,
I'll
encouraging.
save that for your show. But if you want to hear some funny sex talk, yeah, come to Static Radio. Yeah.
Yeah, would you be my guest on Sex 101, please? Let's be a
Is
comedy on
is
Sex
your is
101.
your topic about begging for sex? Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, let's do the topic begging for sex on Sex 101.
Actually,
Let's.
I will try to get you. I try to get you a guest for Sex 101. I
Oh,
will.
wow. That's amazing. You know, my inspiration why I created Sex 101? Miss
I'm
Emily.
assuming you're looking for sex. That would be my guess.
No, I was listening to this podcast, Sex with Emily. So why should I cannot make a podcast like that? Sex 101, why not?
Well, okay. I don't know. That's a good question. I haven't. I have to see a picture of this other person. Who was her name? Emily. What was it?
Emily, Sex with Emily.
Oh,
Try
Sex with
to,
Emily. Okay,
yes,
I see. Well,
yes, they talk about
maybe
everything.
Emily has got more to offer, Daniel. I don't know.
Just like you, the podcast is running for like 21 years, I think.
Oh my
So,
gosh, really? I'll have to look
yes,
this up.
yes, yes,
Maybe I need
yes.
to talk to her.
You need to talk to her and talk about sex as a comedy platform. Yes.
Yeah.
I 100% guarantee you will satisfied or satisfy.
See, you just keep Daniel. I don't know.
Uh,
You got the comedy thing. You got it
yes.
down here.
Yes, we want to people listening right now to laugh because laughter is the best medicine. So, Mr. Bob, to sum up our discussion, what is the science behind the physical act of laughing and why does it feel good?
I That's a good question. I think we are one of the few. I don't think. Can you think of any other animal that laughs? I had a dog that kind of laughed once, and I had a dog who hated it when we laughed. He would bark at us if we were laughing, so he didn't like laughing. But yeah, we're the only animals that laugh, and
Yes,
and a lot of sometimes the funny thing about laughing is once you start laughing, there becomes a point where you can't stop laughing. No matter what is said, no matter how stupid, no matter how inane, you will keep laughing once you get past that point, and you just laugh at anything. And I think that's the goal of most comedians, is to get you laughing so hard that they can just say anything they want and you will just keep laughing.
yes. I
And
love
why does it
laughing.
make you feel so good? I think it makes you feel so good because your blood gets pumping, right? A lot of times it goes to your face because you get embarrassed. So you get a rush of blood to your head, which is never a bad thing because lack of blood to the head is a horrible outcome for everybody. So you have to have blood going to your head, and uh,
Yes,
and so you get warm. It makes you feel good. When you're done laughing, there's the rare times where you laugh so hard that you hurt yourself, but that's very rare.
it's very
So it's
rare.
always a
Yes.
positive experience, much like Sex 101. At the end of it, you feel pretty darn good about everything.
Yes. Laughing is like sex, people. So the same thing. It's something in the brain creates something what
Well, I think in sex the blood goes someplace else, but
blood. Yes,
it's not such a bad thing either.
it's not a bad thing. Laughter is the best medicine, and very well said, Mr. Bob. And another great episode, our first episode for probably 3 months, but I'm stuck. So, Mr. Bob, thank you so much for your time. More to come, people. See you soon. I, I think that's not our soundtrack that I did. Oh my
That's
goodness.
okay.